Welcome to the week that was, but we mostly wish it wasn't, a weekly roundup of the major stories concerning campus anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, as if those are different things. I'm your host, Andrew Pessin. I am a professor, but please don't hate me. I've been documenting and analyzing campus anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism for a long time now. Find out more about me and my work at andrewpessin.com. Our sponsor is Amcha Initiative, a nonprofit organization that investigates, documents, and combats anti-Semitism on U.S. college and university campuses. For over a decade, Amcha has maintained the most comprehensive, publicly accessible database of campus anti-Semitism in the United States, covering over 700 universities with more than 10,000 incidents documented. For find out more and to support their work, please visit amchainitiative.org. So this is our roundup of the week that was, the last week of June. Just so you know, all the stories we're going to discuss today came just from this past week, and it's summer, which is a slow time. So that'll give you a sense of the scale of the problem. Let's start with some of the headlines. We'll begin with Harvard University, that wonderful hotspot of campus anti-Semitism. The Trump administration has been trying to ban foreign students from being able to enroll at Harvard. This past week, a federal judge issued an injunction stopping that proclamation. The Trump administration followed by appealing that decision. So we'll see what comes of that in the near future. Meanwhile, the University of Toronto has reached an agreement with Harvard to accommodate the foreign students that can't make it to Harvard because of visa restrictions. Turning to Columbia University, competing always with Harvard for that top spot in campus anti-Semitism. Very famous pro-Hamas graduate student Mahmoud Khalil was finally released from detention after several months in detention and immediately jumped back into leading protests at Columbia against Israel and ultimately the United States as well. And in a case of good timing, Columbia this week released its third anti-Semitism task force report, reaching the conclusion, not surprising a single person, that in 23-24, the majority of Jewish students felt they were not accepted here because of their religious identity. Talk about an understatement. Meanwhile, Unity of Fields, a group that was very active in leading the pro-Hamas protests at Columbia, posted a photo this week of U.S. soldiers in coffins with the caption, "Soon, inshallah, God willing." Across the pond in the United Kingdom, Goldsmiths University this week also published a report following an independent inquiry, and in a report surprising absolutely no one, concluded that Goldsmith University had failed in its duty of care to the Jewish students and staff on their campus, to the point where the Jewish society there had to dissolve for safety reasons. Goldsmith did issue an apology, but of course it remains to be seen what actions they will take to correct this situation. Meanwhile, Congress was busy this past week. The presidents of DePaul, Haverford, and Cal Poly San Luis Obispo received a letter from the chair of the Education and Workforce Committee, basically demanding more information following up their hearings in the past month there, and in particular reprimanded Haverford for their lack of transparency about what they are doing to combat anti-Semitism on those campuses. A separate committee in Congress, the Subcommittee on Oversight of the Judiciary Committee in the House of Representatives, held a hearing this week about the rising threat, America's battle against anti-Semitic terror. It was a 2-hour hearing. It featured some important witnesses, including Ken Marcus of the Brandeis Center, who's doing some wonderful lawfare work we're coming to in just a moment. This hearing was focusing on certain phrases that congressional members believe are intimidating to Jewish students, such as globalize the intifada, i.e., bring the campaign of mass Jewish murder everywhere. I wonder why that's intimidating. And other topics as well. Meanwhile, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed a bill expanding Florida's anti-BDS prohibitions to include academic boycotts as well, mandating divestment from any entity that boycotts Israel. So Florida is earning its reputation as an Israel-friendly and maybe ultimately Jewish-friendly state. Although, as we switch now to some of the shenanigans this past week on universities, there's a little caveat for University of Florida. A law student who posted online that Jews should be abolished by any means necessary won an award this past week for a paper in which he argued that the Constitution applies only to white people. I'm sure there'll be much discussion of that one. Meanwhile, Georgetown ISCAP, the Institute for the Study of Global Antisemitism and Policy, a wonderful organization, has issued a new report on Georgetown this week, documenting how Qatar essentially uses Georgetown to advance the Muslim Brotherhood agenda by dictating curriculum and shaping America's diplomats. This is must reading, and it is quite terrifying. University of Chicago almost pales in comparison this week because all they had there was some anti-Semitic graffiti reading "Kill all Jews" and, excuse me, "Kike," found very near the University of Chicago campus. California Institute of the Arts. Due to pressure from Students for Justice in Palestine, SJP, the Board of Trustees there is now revising its investment policy to meet some of those SGP demands. There's a campaign to call on the board to declare that it should not adopt BDS, the boycott, divestment, and sanctions policies. Across the pond again, King's College, part of the esteemed Cambridge University, has adopted a new divestment policy under pressure from anti-Israel activists. They will exclude financial investments in companies that are involved in activities such as occupation. Of course, there's no mention of any of the other alleged occupations in the world, including in Cyprus and Western Sahara. This bill will, of course, target the alleged occupation of Judea and Samaria only. Things were busy in the courts this past week as well. Several lawsuits underway. Speaking of the Brandeis Center in Ken Marcus, they filed an anti-Semitism lawsuit against MIT. This one was a long time coming. At Cornell, some Jewish graduate students are suing their union with discrimination charges for harassing them because the union, of course, as many have, has become extremely anti-Israel, and these Jewish graduate students do not want to be compelled to pay union dues to a union that does not represent them, and were undergoing severe harassment for their efforts not to pay those union dues. They're now suing the union. In British Columbia, via the Lawfare Project, a Jewish former teacher at the Victoria School for Ideal Education, doesn't sound so ideal, has filed a human rights complaint alleging that she was the target of anti-Jewish discrimination. I'll leave out the details here. And in Seattle, a former student is suing her high school, for anti-Semitism. The lawsuit outlines harassment, including a student spitting on her, death threats, and anti-Semitic remarks such as Hitler's plan should have worked. Uh, just criticizing Israel, I'm sure they'll be saying there. Speaking of SJP, Students for Justice in Palestine, also a busy week. At Bates College, they received the award for outstanding community engagement. I guess Jew hating is profitable these days. National SJP put out a statement this week calling for the fall of the American empire, just in case you wonder where they stand on the United States. And they also put out a post, in my view, pretty clearly supporting, inciting, or suggesting violence against Israelis and Americans. It's a picture of a red claw gripping Iran with fingernails painted with American and Israeli flags with the caption, "The alternative to leaving vertically is leaving horizontally." So I guess they're rooting for that outcome. And finally, we wrap up with some of the naughty professors of this past week. Georgetown professor called for Iran to strike U.S. bases. That's good American patriotism there. The university did say they were appalled at this person's remarks, but I think there's good money wagering that they won't do anything about it. A University of Chicago professor was cheering the Iranian missiles that were falling on Israel. At Johns Hopkins University, professor there uses her academic platform to spread the typical lies and disinformation, including false accusations of genocide and blood libel against Israel. The Bi-College Faculty and Students for Justice in Palestine, this represents Haverford and Bryn Mawr, put out a post with really a stunning blood libel, a cartoon from 1876, stating that Israel is a this is their gloss on it. The cartoon from 1876 is a picture of a cowboy who has murdered a Native American child and says, "If I hadn't killed you, you would have grown up to rule me." And then their caption on it is that Israel is a continuation of the same colonial barbarism. And at San Jose State University, here's a tiny bit of good news. The administration has terminated the employment of a tenured member of the Department of Justice Studies due to alleged violations of university time, manner, and place rules for participation in last year's pro-Hamas protests. So That's some of the news from this past week, and all of that was just in this past week. Tune in next week to see what horrors the next week shall bring. Again, I'm your host, Andrew Pesson at andrewpesson.com, appreciating the important work of AMCHA Initiative and hoping everyone manages to keep it together. Until next time. Thanks.